And you see that hardship that Neo goes through, right, as a result of all of this. Look at Neo's entire story here, where he comes into this whole new world that he's stepping into.
A whole new world.
I knew you were going to do that. As soon as I was saying it, I'm like, wrong choice of words. Wrong choice of words. So he's offered this, jumping right back in, he's offered this choice of the blue pill or the red pill, and he's given this really sobering, like, okay, Neo, count the cost sort of moment, right? Like he's given, there's no turning back after this. You can go back to your life, forget all this happened, believe the lie, move on, the end. Or you can find out how deep this really goes. You can accept the truth, count the cost now, pick which way you're going to go with this. And Neo does. What's very interesting to me is that there is that count the cost sort of dynamic to it, and yet how can Neo truly count the cost fully when, like he had said, you can't be told what it is. You have to see it. You have to experience it to some degree. And so he counts the cost. He takes the red pill, but then he winds up in the Nebuchadnezzar about to pop, not liking the way reality turns out to be. And really, we don't see him completely change over overnight because he took that pill. He has to go through training. He has to be what I would call sanctified. Like it's not an instantaneous change for him. He counts the cost. He takes that pill, but then he has to learn how this new worldview that he has is going to change the way he views where he was living before entirely. Everything about it now he has to be mindful about and think about in a completely different way. He can't be walking down the street and have thoughts of lust distract him. Like the fact that they're using that sort of a thing as a direct example of this training that he goes through, everything about his existence changed that moment. And he couldn't truly know all of that before that initial acceptance of the red pill. And you see that with Cypher, like we said a little bit ago. We see with Cypher that he likewise probably had that same situation where he was interested, took the red pill, and then later regretted it because he didn't know what all it entailed. I don't know. Do you guys think that's a fair picture of what salvation can sort of be like at times, as far as how it works itself out in our life? That there is this sobering decision we make, and yet we don't truly know the hardship or even truly know the blessings of it until later. It comes with time.
Yeah, I think so. I think that can definitely be. So, like, for example, part of my testimony was, it's sort of like the typical grew up in a Christian house template of a testimony. Accepted Christ when I was 5, got baptized at 6, didn't really understand until I was about 13, rededicated my life, blah, blah, blah. So if you had asked me a number of years ago, when did I get saved, I would have said 13. I wouldn't have said 5. But in retrospect, I've sort of gone back on that because it's like, do I understand salvation now, for that matter? I mean, like, at what level does our intellectual understanding have to be? I mean, I think I understood the faith well enough. It's just I don't think I counted the cost and knew really what I was signing up for at the age of 5. And so that recommitment was still meaningful for me. But I think that there's something to be said for what you've described, which is that we, in action and in practice, in life, when life hits, we come to discover the types of people that we are and the types of people that God wants us to be. And we come to discover what it is that God has for us. And that's not always pleasant. Sometimes that's just rough and can be brutal. But I think that there's a great image of that. And you mentioned sanctification earlier. That really stood out to me on this viewing. Not only does he have the training sequences, the whole Morpheus is fighting Neo kind of sequences. Well before that, he has to be reconstructed. He's never used his eyes before. I mean, the fact that he's seeing with new eyes entirely is just mind-blowing for the story also, but just for the symbolism of that as well. His muscles have atrophied. They have to rebuild them with that crazy acupuncture-looking thing.
He had to be born again.
Yeah, he had to go
quite
through... Quite literally. Yeah. He had to be born, and then he had to be kind of put back together. And I don't know exactly what that corresponds to, besides perhaps like the very earliest stages of sanctification, where you're developing your understanding of the faith. I'm not entirely sure if there's a good cut and dry place for that parallel, but the more intensive work of being assembled as a child of God, and then of course that working out within practice during the course of his training as he walks around in the Matrix and interacts with his shipmates and things like that. So I think that there's something to be said for the sort of stages related to salvation, where it's not just an instantaneous thing, and we get to see some really good illustration of that here in the Matrix.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this in kind of two different forms. I mean, if you take it and run and actually look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, when you look at the disciples, I think you can see some great examples. Like, they sign on, they follow Jesus, and then but Peter does not get it. Peter winds up denying him. Like, nobody goes full Judas except Judas.
Never go full Judas. It's really not funny.
But
we're laughing. We're awful people. You think about it. Anyways.
But so I think the quality of making that decision, it's counting the cost. Like, do I believe it's worth dying for? Do I believe that the delusion that I really believe I'm living in is worth any price, and it's a willingness to pay that? I think sometimes we say that and we don't know what is going to materialize as actually being the way that lives out. Like, okay, short of death, how much pain or what kind of pain is it going to cause us? What kind of persecution? Or what's the fullness of that truth? You make the disciples are stumbling along the way, and of course then Pentecost. So I think their experience mirrors Neo's in a way, maybe more than I tangibly think about in terms of the own sort of a post-resurrection Christian experience. But at the same time, I mean, like, even as we sign on to it, sometimes like, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to go counterculture here. I didn't know I was going to have to give up this. I didn't realize that I was going to be convicted of this nuance. I mean, I had some good friends. They came to Christ and fully believed, but it was still a couple of months before they realized, my friend realized, oh, my girlfriend can't be a stripper anymore. Like, that there were just small, it's like, they're willing to take that leap, but they're like, oh, I had no idea what areas this was going to spin out and open up. And that's, it's like a veil can get pulled away, but then there's still so much we need to learn, and so much we need, like you said, sanctification and just discipleship. Like, oh, I had no idea that this was going to be a part of it. I had no idea. Wait, as we get to know our God better, I see this in Christians all the time. They're reading through the Old Testament, especially. They're like, wait, God did what? And this was okay? Because, like, just the 3 years of Jesus' message, like, I didn't quite get fully what he was fulfilling in the Old Testament. So even we grow in our concept. Okay, God is love, but I'm looking at this. So what does love mean? We have to redefine all of our terms. There's so much we don't realize is coming with the package we got. So there is a counting of the cost that we're willing to risk everything. But yeah, then when it hits the fan, you're like, oh, I was not anticipating everything tasting like chicken. I was not anticipating, being in this real world. I didn't realize I was going to lose my hair. That's obviously happened to me, just like Neo. So that's the cost of discipleship.
What you're describing to me reminds me of a meme I saw a couple days ago about parenthood, and I think it was a mother it showed, and it said parenthood is a lot like feeling such a love for your child that you would gladly give up your life for them, but if they ask you for one more glass of milk, you're going to lose it. And it's kind of like that, though. Like, it's this sort of like, you're all in. Like, you would lay down your, like, there is that sort of finality that can kind of come to your spirit as a result of what you've experienced, but you didn't realize what the living for Christ part was going to look like so much. You weren't fully understanding of what that's going to look like daily to do that.